welcome back to Casuals Corner and welcome back to another episode of Rising Stars. And if you're new to the channel or you haven't seen this video before, basically what we do is we take UFC fighters on the roster that we believe has the potential to go to the next level or become title champions in the coming years, and we take a look at them for you if you haven't heard of them or you don't know as much about them. And today we are going to be going through Jack Shaw. Now, to say I was excited about making this video is an absolute understatement. I loved going through his interviews, I loved going through his footage as well, and I truly believe that this man is going to be a future champion, so much so that I even put my cold hard cash on the line. Now, before we jump into it and before I get way too excited and way ahead of myself, let's actually have a look at his fighter profile. So as you can see, he's 26 years of age and he fights out of Wales, Abertillery. I'm sure I would have butchered that pronunciation. And he fights out of Shaw Martial Arts Centre of Excellence, which is very interesting because that's him and his old man's very new gym that they've just built. He's 5'6" and he is 135 pounds and fights at bantamweight, but recently even asked for fights at catchweight or featherweight because he had 3 dropouts. And as you can see as well, his record is 14-0 with 4 TKOs and 8 submissions. So you can see he is one very, very dangerous individual. The one thing that you need to know about Jack Shaw and Jack Shaw as a personality, he is very much a valley boy, self-confessed valley boy. As I said, he's from Abertillery in Wales, and if you don't know, and I'm not ashamed to say I didn't before this video, it's a tiny town in between 2 mountains, a very, very small village feel. You can walk down the road and know 9 out of 10 people. And he's very proud of his roots and he loves it so much so that he's even just began to build a 3-bedroom house there. So he's very settled in his roots and he's very proud of where he's from. And he loves it so much so that he's very much rooted there for the rest of his life, he said. He said he'll probably never leave. And on top of that, with his personality, the one thing that sticks out to me when I think of Jack Shaw, and the one word that jumps out of the page, or the one sentence that jumps out of the page, is lifelong martial artist, because that's exactly what he is. He started training when he was 6 years old, started competing when he was 10 years old, and started mixed martial arts when he was 12 years old. So as you can see, even at the crazy young age of 26, he's very much a mixed martial artist, and he's very much a student of the game as well. He's competed in pretty much every martial art, and this is what makes him so exciting for my books. He's wrestled, he's jiu-jitsu. I mean, his old man had a jiu-jitsu school pretty much from the day he was born, so you can see the pedigree there. He's kickboxed since a young age and he's boxed as well. So it really does make him a very exciting prospect. And before, like I said, get too excited, and I will jump into his technical ability and his fighting ability in the second half of it, but I really wanted to take the first half of the video to just give you an understanding and a look and an insight into why I'm so confident that he's going to be a future champion, and not only based off his abilities but also based off of his mindset and his lifestyle as well. I think naturally, as a product of his environment as well, he's sort of grown up not going out too much and dedicating a lot of his time to training. So as he says now, he doesn't go out an often lot, so he doesn't spend an awful lot of money, he doesn't have a lot of expenses. So he said the money which he did save, he invested into building his own home, like I said, in his hometown as well, and he's building a 3-bedroom house. So it goes to sort of show you where his mindset's at, and it's not to say that to be a champion you can never go out, but like I said, it begins to paint a picture of his lifestyle. But one thing that I find most interesting about Jack Shaw, which I really sometimes do see the difference between him and other fighters, and I really think this is something that sets him apart, is, interestingly enough, he studied a psychology degree. Now that already tells you he's quite a astute, cerebral person, knowing to have something to fall back on. And he said in the interviews that this isn't because he doubted his own abilities, but you know and I know how the fight game goes, and quite literally anything can happen. That's what happens when you lock yourself in a cage and fight to the death with someone, like it's a gladiator sort of war. So that's a very smart move. But when you think of psychology, I guess the classic cliche is, you're a mind reader, you know exactly what someone's thinking, which isn't the case. But what you do study is human behavior and mental processes, and this is really, really clear when you watch him fight. You can tell that he's very cerebral, like I said, and he's very methodical. You can see even when he's flowing in between positions when he's grappling, and some of these, he's so well rounded, but some of his most dominant positions is when he's flowing from full mount to take your back. And you can tell when he's fighting with his opponents that he's not searching for anything. He's not looking for anything. Even though that he has 7 submission finishes via rear naked choke on his record, you can tell that when he's going out there, he's not chasing these rear naked chokes, but he has tremendous top pressure. He said that he wrestles with lightweights and welterweights, and he says they struggle to compete with him, so he knows that when he's going in at bantamweight, that his pressure is going to be a lot for people, and there's not going to be a lot of people to deal with that. So he's very confident in that, and he has great ground and pound. So typically what you'll see him doing is riding from full mount to taking back with good strikes in there and good creativity as well, until he finds an opening. And you can tell that he just methodically breaks his opponent down, and then you can see they present an opening, which is usually a neck, which he'll cinch in the rear naked choke. And I mean, you can tell that he has all the abilities, and he's got other submissions on his card, but you can tell that this is a common one, because that's a slight error that people make that he'll pick up on so quick. And I watched him roll in some of his sort of behind the scenes sort of footage within an interview, and I saw exactly that. He was going very light with someone, not his full capacity at all, but they were just very sort of controlled, and they hadn't made any mistakes. And as soon as they made a mistake, bang, he capitalized. So you can see that plays a big part in his fighting as well, which I find very, very interesting. I watched a breakdown video as well, which compared his style on top and his on top pressure compared to Damian Maia, and you could see the similarities, and it was crazy. They put them side by side, and they literally flowed exactly through the same sequences, and it may as well have been either one of them. It was mental. It was like watching the Messi and Maradona goal side by side. And that's another thing that he sort of mentioned in interviews as well. He said he's taken inspiration from people like Khabib and people like GSP, and I know they call him the Welsh Khabib, which is funny because, I mean, not only is he very much going on that trajectory, but he does have a similar style of being dominating on the ground in that way. And you can also see the similarities with GSP. And what I really liked as well is he said what he liked about GSP is that whoever he fought, there was never holes in his game. No one could ever fight GSP and think, oh, okay, I'm going to take him down, or oh, okay, I'm going to strike with him. So when GSP came against a striker, he'd wrestle or he'd grapple. And when he came up against a grappler, he'd strike. And Jack Shaw always speaks to loving having that versatility and knowing there's no holes in his game. So whoever he comes up against, he's ready for that fight. And he said that's another point of what makes him so ready when he has so many dropouts, is because he really is ready for any style and anyone. And he's talks a lot about being reactionary in the fight. So not to discredit anything they've done before, people's strengths and weaknesses, but to be very reactionary. Let your instincts and your body take over when you're in that cage, and you can really see that's what happens, because he makes so many small minute adjustments throughout the fight, and I'm sure we'll get onto that in a little bit. But let me continue with the mindset and the lifestyle. And the last thing that I want to sort of touch upon in terms of lifestyle is the people that he has around him, in terms of obviously his old man is his coach as well, and he has very close friends and family around him, and the community feel that they have within Welsh MMA is so tight knit, in fact, that it's always like training with family. And as you can imagine, it's a very small community. So he has a very strong foundation, a very strong core. You know that management's always doing their best for him. And that's a very important thing, because that's, again, something that's quite overlooked in the UFC especially, and sometimes things that can have big impact on the fighters, and we've seen it 100 times over. What impresses me so much about Jack Shaw as well, and we'll go on to look at him as a sort of fighter now, is not only his wealth of experience, but him as a professional. He stays pretty much in shape all year round, so he never has aggressive weight cuts, or he doesn't have extreme weight cuts where he's going to be sapped of energy on fight night. And he goes to the gym, he says, about 2 to 3 times every day anyway, whether that's in camp or not. So you can sort of see the mindset and the lifestyle of Jack immediately. And the thing that impresses me even more is a lot of fighters, or most fighters, will always say, and I've always heard them say, have as many amateur fights as you can, because ultimately they don't matter. Use them as experience, and then when you're a professional, obviously then you can worry a little bit more about your record, but get as much experience as you can. And that's exactly what he's done, not only in so many disciplines of martial arts, but from such a young age. And he speaks about now how he's not fazed by any of it all, because, like I said, he's been competing since he's 10 years old. So he really has gone around the world. He's gone to all different organisations. He spoke about how he's had to fight 4 nights in a row for one organisation, and how the people on that card, they didn't they weren't there to pad records. They were the best of the best. And he was saying he was fighting 4 nights in a row. So he really has done it all. He's had to make weight multiple times. Like I said, he's travelled before. He said he's done all the cameras before because he's been on fight night since he was quite young. He was a Cage Warriors champion at a very young age. And he even denied a UFC contract 4 times. I think on the 4th time of asking, he accepted. So you can see that maturity in his game as well. And you can see that he knows and he's confident that he's ready to bring it and to bring it at the highest level. And he got his, just to put it into context as well, he got his first offer when he was 3-0. And he was roughly about 13-0, 12-0, something like that coming into the UFC. And just to touch upon his amateur record as well, he was a champion in numerous things, but he was 12-0 in his amateur record. So you can see there that he is a very, very good talent, because there isn't a lot of people that stay undefeated as an amateur and then stay undefeated as a pro. And I think he's currently 14-0 now as well. So you can see why a lot of people are sort of getting quite excited about him. And I know Dana White has spoke about him before as well. And to just touch upon the point I just made in terms of the lights and the experiences in the different countries, that is really important, because when someone comes into the UFC, especially from somewhere like a Cage Warriors, a European organisation, questions are always going to be around them and how they can deal with the pressure. How can they deal with the lights? How can they deal with the travel, the time zones, the jet lag? But this is what sets him apart from a lot of other people very new on the UFC roster, that he's done that all from a very young age. He's seen it, he's breathed it, he's lived it for a few years now, so he's very comfortable with it. And he says in many interviews that, not in an arrogant way, but he has no stress around fighting whatsoever, because it's second nature to him. And you can see that he's not doing it for any bravado or with any arrogance, but he genuinely just means when you've been doing this for 16 years, you get quite used to it, you get comfortable with it. And that's the beauty of having so much experience before you get into the UFC. And you can see how adapted he is to that with all of these last minute preparations, because not only is it difficult for someone to come in with 2 weeks notice, but you have to think, or a week's notice in his case, but you have to think is even hard. It can be even harder sometimes for the fighter to have that short notice, because they would have had a whole camp to prepare for one certain type of person. But like I said before, he believes he's so well rounded and so well astute in so many different areas that within reason it doesn't matter who's coming onto the scene. So if we just move on to having a look at him as a particular fighter now, his striking, first of all, I guess that's where all fights start, is very, very good. And I know he was speaking about developing the rest of his weapons even more so, including knees and elbows, which is a terrifying thought. But his striking is very, very good. And like I said, he's been kickboxing from such a young age. And he's bistantral as well, which gives him so many advantages, because obviously you have attacks and defenses off of both sides. But what he does is quite similar to Dustin Poirier in a way. He sort of has this lateral shift where I was watching him in Cage Warriors on one of his older fights, and he was starting from orthodox. He landed the right hand, flowed into a southpaw stance, had 2 lead uppercuts to his chin that landed flush, and then as the fella backed up, he walked through into the orthodox and threw the right hook as well. And it was just a beautiful sequence, but it was such a small clip of the fight, and there was so much more of that. But it gives him that advantage to be able to go power shot to power shot and really apply pressure from so many different angles that they get overwhelmed by this barrage of attacks. And then it gives that opening when the hands come up to then level change. And then I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see him blast a double on his next fight after starting with the hands. And then once that fight goes down to the floor, that's his bread and butter, and he believes that he's superior to probably everyone in that division, I would imagine. So he's happy for that fight to go there quite quickly. And that's typically what you'll see him do sometimes. I think he's clever in terms of sometimes he knows where the easiest path to victory is. You'll see his opponent maybe overextend in the striking, and then bang, he'll look to then grapple off of that exchange, take that weakness and then use that as the opening. And I won't do a fight breakdown of the entire fight, but just having a look at his next fight that's coming up on Saturday against Ludwig. Now, I've actually watched a couple of his fights because he was on The Ultimate Fighter, and there's a reason why he took this fight and why no one else did, because he is fearless. This man really, really is fearless, and that's exactly why he took it, because anyone else with sense knew to not touch this with a barge pole. That's why it was so hard for him to find opponents, and I really think that Ludwig's toughness is going to be his own downfall, because if he comes out and walks Jack Shaw down, I think that Jack Shaw is going to be forced to have to show off some very, very exciting and very slick hands, which I can see him getting either, because Ludwig's a very good wrestler, so I can see him level changing onto a knee potentially, or even just walking down with a potentially relaxed guard and him just eating an elbow, and it could be a very, very short night out for Jack Shaw in the end, and I think he could get it done in the first. But if not, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get him out in the second via rear naked choke. I think he'll probably find an entry, he'll mount him, he'll take his back, he'll beat him up, and he'll grind out an opening until we can get that neck and choke him out. So I really think that Ludwig has to be a little bit careful. If he comes out too gung-ho and hasn't done his research enough, it could be a very difficult night out for him. And just to wrap this up, the reason why I feel so confident and so certain that we're going to see Jack Shaw as a potential champion is because he's been doing this his whole life. He's been a champion since he can remember. He's competed, like I said, in pretty much every discipline of martial arts, and he's been at the top of the table for most part. He's undefeated in his amateur record, he's undefeated in his pro record, and he's a student of the game, and he knows what it takes to get to the top. And you can see from his lifestyle and the support network around him that he's primed to go there. And I genuinely am very excited for him, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he could potentially be one of the best mixed martial artists that ever comes out of Britain. In terms of a complete martial artist, I genuinely believe that he has the potential and the ability to be one of the best ever. I think every now and again you sort of get these generational talents where everything comes together: mindset, lifestyle, upbringing, ability, and it gets poured into this mixing pot, and this champion is born. And I genuinely believe that he's seen it all and he's done it all before. Like I said, it's his bread and butter now. He's been doing this for over a decade, and nearly two. So I think he's very comfortable with any uncomfortable situation, and that's what makes him different. I think all the questions you ask of potential champions, he's answered. And I think the only tick box that he hasn't checked off yet is that UFC gold, and I'm sure he's coming for that. Whether he does that in the next year or two, I'm not sure, but I've put this video out there and I'm more than 100% certain that one day I'll look back on this and say I knew it. And hopefully I'll be doing it with him as an interviewee. But anyway, I loved making this video, so if you enjoyed it, please drop a like and a subscribe, or even drop a comment of who you want to see next, because I really, really did love it. I loved watching his breakdowns, I love watching his interviews, and he's definitely one to watch for the future. So like I said, get involved with the content, follow me on Instagram and TikTok as well for daily MMA content, and enjoy the fights on Saturday. It should be an absolute barn burner. Peace.